Alright, so let's continue. So now we need to make the request to the public API endpoint in order to fetch the meaning of the word that the user searched for. So for this, we are going to use the dictionary API.dev this thing. And before we can actually consume the data, we can make the request, we first need to know what exactly do we need to do, or to say in other words, how to use this API endpoint. So we need to make a GET request to this endpoint, and we need to append the word at the very end, the last segment of the path, in order to get the meaning. So for instance, let's try the same thing, and this is how the data looks like. Now, the other thing is I've installed a Chrome extension. I'm using Google Chrome, so I've installed an extension called JSON Formatter. You can do the same thing. It essentially allows us to view the JSON in a formatted way. As you can see, I can actually collapse the different things, the structure of the data which is being returned. So let's take a look at how it is structured. So let me just actually change the word, the last segment of the path, to be of beautiful, as that's what we need to look at. And let's actually analyze the structure. So keep it as a rule of thumb that whenever you are using a public endpoint or a public API, something like an API which you didn't create, or to say in other words that you're not the one who structured the return data, in that case, just take some time out in order to analyze the data structure, like how the API, how the returned value is structured. Because it's not always going to be the case that you will be getting the data structured exactly the way as how you need it to be. So for instance, when we search for a word, when we make the GET request to the respective API endpoint, we get back the JSON, an array containing objects, and these objects will actually, for this one, for this word that we searched for, beautiful, this returns back just a single object. But that's not always going to be the case. Like if I search for a different word, for instance, bear, whatever the pronunciation is, as you can see, it returns back two objects within the array. So these objects, the top level objects that we have, these are different meaning of the same word. So if I just pop open the first object, let's analyze the structure, and let me just collapse everything to be in the same level. So within this structure, within this object, we have the word, we have the phonetic, we have the phonetics, which is an array. And within this array, we have a single object within which we have the audio property, which actually links to the MP3 for the pronunciation that we actually need to use. So if I just copy the same thing and if I look it up, as you can see, this is the MP3 of the pronunciation. So this is something which we actually need to use in the application. So let's keep it in mind that we need to use this thing. So that being aside, let's take a look at the meanings. So within this, we have an array, like it's an array containing objects. So if I just pop it open, within the object, there is part of speech, whether it is a verb, a noun, an adjective, whatever it is, it will be placed over here as the value of the part of speech. Then the other property this object has is definition, definitions, plural, which is an array, and it contains different definition of the same word, as you can see. So as you can see, the structure is quite tricky, it's quite confusing, and that's why it's always suggested to take some time out and to analyze the structure. And the best way for you in order to analyze the structure is just visit the live application and search for the word, search for any word. So for instance, if we search for beautiful, we will see that it returns back a single box, which is adjective, and it displays the meaning. So if we just take a look at the same thing, let's search for beautiful on the API. So it returns back a single object. and that's why we have this one. Well, they are not connected, so let me just actually pop it open. This is the phonetics, and we are using this thing right over here in order to play the audio, as you can see. Then within the meanings, we have an array within which there is just a single property, and the part of speech is adjective, and the definition, there is just one. Well, actually, yep, there's just one, which is this thing, and it is being displayed over here. So let's try the same thing with a different example, and let me just search for phone, because I earlier checked that it has quite a lot different things. So if we do the same thing over here, let me just collapse the entire thing, and for this part of the entire tutorial or series that we are building this application is, whatever it is, just take some time out and closely look at the structure. So as you can see, we have 3 different objects, which means 3 different meanings of the same word. And for that case, for each object, we are going to divide them with a separator. This divider, as you can see, it's quite like it's light in color, but I guess you will be able to see this thing. So we are going to have the section, or to say like, yeah, a different section for each meaning. So within the first one, let's pop it open, which would be this part. This entire object is creating this thing, these 2 cards to say. And I know this may be a bit confusing for you to get to kind of comprehend for the first time, but again, I'm saying this again, that just take some time out and closely analyze the structure. So over here, within the first object, which would be this thing, these 2 cards are the result of the first object. Within this, we have the meanings, which is an array, and it contains 2 objects. So it means that this thing, the meanings within the object, are the cards, these cards that you see over here, as you can see. And within the object, we have part of speech, which is this thing. And within the definitions, we have the definition, this thing. And in the second object, this one, the part of speech is verb, which is right over here. And the other thing is, within the definition in the first one, you will see that this time it's an array, like it's always an array, but this time it has more than one object. As you can see, it has 2 different definitions. As you can see, a telephone, headphone, or earphone. So we need to get just the definition property within these objects. As you can see, a telephone and the other definition, the headphone or earphones, something like this. So the other thing is, if there are more than one object within the definitions array, we need to display the number, which means like it's the first, second definition of the same thing. For the verb one, it would be just one object within the definitions array, as that's what it is, as you can see. So within this object, we just need the definition part, the definition property, which is this thing. And the verb is the part of speech. So that's how it is structured. And in order to consume this data, to display it as such, we would have to run quite a few different loops, quite a few different maps. The first one that we need to do is, we need to map over the entire array, within which we need to map over the meanings array, this thing, and we need to display the box for each object which is inside the meanings. And within each objects there is definitions array, so we again need to run a loop for the definition of the word, which is the property inside these objects. So again, I'm repeating that it might be a bit confusing to kind of comprehend for the first time, so just take some time out and compare it next to the live application in order to better understand how we need to do it. So that being said, I hope you were able to get the basic idea, like what we need to do in order to consume the data, like how we are going to use this data and how we are going to present it in the application. So that being said, let's actually consume the data and use it within the application in the next video.